Back to Sober Now. I'm Jim LaPierre. Today's topic, and very much welcome your comments, your questions, your experience, strength, and hope, is when we lose loved ones in recovery. I know if you're anything like me, if you're in recovery yourself, if you've worked with people who are in recovery, you are tired of losing people to active addiction. Maine is poised to have over 500 losses directly attributable to overdose deaths this year. We lose people in all kinds of ways, and I think we think about that most often in terms of losing them to the disease. I think it was 25 years ago, the first time I noted the passing of someone that I cared deeply about, and the first thing I heard said about them was, they died sober. And that really struck me, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it. So I know that things are harder. They're more difficult than they've ever been, and that's largely due to our current pandemic. That's due to socio-political unrest. It's due to a lot of things. But honestly, I don't want to talk about any of those obstacles today. I want to talk about how we cope with them, how we adjust to them. I often think of Mother Jones. She was a famous activist who did an enormous amount of the good in the world. And she said, "Pray for the dead, but fight like hell for the living." And I think about that quite often. So my hope is that as we explore this topic today, that you think about how these things affect you personally. My experience is that everything connects us back to self. Everything connects us to our past. Everything connects us to our family of origin. And just as all of us profess to have trust issues, we also have abandonment issues and rejection issues. And so when we lose someone that was in recovery from substance use disorder, it's often a trigger. It's often something that connects us to past grief, what a therapist would call unresolved grief and loss. And we usually cope in unhealthy ways. Maybe we blame ourselves. Maybe we decide that being stoic is what we think of as being strong for others. And one of the things that saddens me is seeing a whole group of people just being strong for each other. I think if you really want to be of service to someone, you can help them explore their grief and loss. And in order to best do that, then we're going to explore a little bit today about how it is that we do that individually. I want us to think about recovery in terms of more than just substance use disorder. People recover from all kinds of conditions. We recover from trauma, mental illness, eating disorders, self-harm. We recover from things like cancer and medical diseases. And sometimes those are the very things that take away the people we love in recovery. Sometimes we lose them to something sudden and unexpected, like a car accident, and sometimes we lose them because they go back out, because they succumb to mental illness, because they isolate, or they simply go away. Sometimes we lose them due to divorce, and we feel like we have to take sides. Sometimes we lose them most tragically because they've completed suicide. So it's horrible and fascinating to me that this is actually a very common Google search term. The term is, "I'm sober, now what?" So I'm old school where recovery is concerned. I say putting abstinence or MAT or whatever works for you in terms of your recovery from substance use disorder first makes perfect sense to me. I always encourage people to do that. And then the question is, after we've attained a reasonable period of sobriety, maybe we've got 6 to 12 months, maybe we're working a program, working with a counselor, working with a sponsor. My greatest hope for folks is that they have some fellowship. Making connections and forming a healthy support system is absolutely vital to any form of recovery. None of us do this alone. Nobody changes their life for the better all by themselves. That's just not a thing. So I'm going to share with you a brief excerpt, and then we're going to get into talking about grieving, talking about transformation. This article that I'm going to quote from comes from a pretty cool website. The site is Sober Badassery, myriad.com, which I think is a pretty great name for a site on recovery. So the author talks about the downside of being sober. And as my friends in AA say, the good thing about being sober is that you feel more, and the bad thing about being sober is that you feel more. But we don't just struggle with feelings, we struggle with memories, intrusive thoughts, the fear of change, and the totality of that can be pretty crushing. So the author writes, if you go to rehab, your counselor or your therapist will try to get you to talk about things that you'd rather forget. You may or may not want to talk about it, and that is fine. Just to let you know, you will eventually have to face it. In fact, once you are sober for a significant amount of time, this kind of thing will start to eat away at you if you don't talk about it with someone. It keeps going deeper. Yes, let's be completely honest with ourselves. You're still holding on to shit that you refuse to talk with about anyone. We all have our dark secrets, a thing or two that we don't want anyone to ever know. So you keep it inside, safe within your own mind, which is a way of maintaining a certain level of detachment. We tell ourselves maybe it wasn't real, maybe I just dreamed it, maybe it wasn't as bad as I think it was, maybe I'm exaggerating, which is frankly never the case. You think about all the nasty, messed up shit that you've done throughout your addiction. Yeah, I mean the things that no one knows, that you don't even want to admit to yourself. But let me tell you, those images in your head won't just disappear. They're going to pop up every now and then, and possibly forever. The thing is that now that you're sober, you can't numb the pain anymore. The horrible thoughts that you were trying to push back, the icky feelings that you hate. That shit is real and you can't undo it, even though you wish you could. I will tell you, it does get better with time, but I won't lie. It can take a hell of a long time. And honestly, I don't think it's about time. I think it's about what you do with that time. I think for most of us, the trauma's still there. The memories are still there. The painful experiences start to surface the longer we go in recovery. And this is what takes a lot of us back out, whether through relapse or suicide. We still have our demons. We still have unresolved grief and loss. We still have childhood abuse. A lot of us have sexual assault. A lot of us just have a very long list of things that feel overwhelming. And they're overwhelming when we look at them individually, much less collectively. But being able to heal is what really solidifies our recovery, and continuing to make investments in our healing and growth are the best safeguard against relapse. What we've traditionally called relapse prevention is actually pretty limited in scope. It's meant for the short term. What are you going to do instead of drinking and drugging? What are you going to do when you feel triggered or feel an urge to use? And what are you going to do instead? And that has enormous value. But if we look at long term, what is my best safeguard against relapse? Continued growth and healing. Having a willingness to slowly, manageably, but with a lot of accountability, continue to heal physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. This is a process of transformation, and it does require a great deal of us. It is one more thing that we cannot do alone. When I do things alone, I get stuck in the same mindset that created the problems, and I can enjoy brief periods of solitude, but it quickly becomes isolation. When it comes to grief, I don't believe that it's possible to grieve alone. I think too often when I have experienced those pains and those losses in my past, when I experience it alone, it is suffering. I feel it. I cry over it. I get caught right up in it, and it feels like wave after wave of pain is just knocking me down. But when I do it alone, what I've learned about myself, and you might be a lot like me, is that I recycle that pain. I experience it over and over and over again, and I don't let go of it. It's actually one of my all-time favorite Facebook memes. Everything I let go of has claw marks on it. And what's amazing to me is to realize that every single thing I have ever struggled to let go of was something that I truly did not want. pain is, well, there simply is no way to release pain in a way that doesn't hurt. Anybody that tells you otherwise is trying to sell you something. There is no way to let go of anger without being angry. And the very best thing that I think we can do is allow others to bear witness to our pain, to grieve collectively, to come together in support of one each other, not by being strong. I think a lot of our ideas about what strength is are really misguided. I say it takes a lot more guts to express pain and release it than it does to hold it in. It's just not what we're used to. I think most people know about the 5 stages of grief, the denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance piece. But I think a lot of us feel conflicted over that. We recognize that so much of what we experience in grief is irrational. Sometimes we're very angry and we don't have someone available or someone that it makes sense to be angry at. We feel like we've already lost too much. We've already buried too many loved ones. We're angry that they left a lot of that grief. And so every future loss connects you to the grief that you continue to carry. Sometimes a very small life circumstance leaves us feeling like we're just coming undone, falling apart. The death of a pet. It may be a big loss. It may be something that's very sad, but we find that we're just can't even function. We're just falling apart over it. And in those kind of circumstances, what we're experiencing is not just the present loss, but every loss that preceded it. And so I think for an awful lot of us, we need to take stock. What am I still carrying? What people call baggage is repressed pain, inner conflicts that were never resolved, amends that have yet to be made. And so we're connected to that in every consequent loss. And if you're in recovery, then you've probably, if you've been around for any length of time, then you've lost count of how many people that you cared about that have died. And that is simply tragic. But again, our responsibility is to honor the dead, which is something that I think we all know, but very few of us seem to know how to do. To me, the best way to honor those that I've lost is to live the life that they would want for me, to make the investment of my own continued growth and healing. I believe that that is a way of honoring their lives, their legacy. I believe that helping the next alcoholic or addict is a huge part of honoring loved ones that have passed. And I think we readily believe in service to others and wanting to help them, but the idea that we would allow others to serve us is very uncomfortable. And yet, it's the most counterintuitive piece in recovery that I've discovered, is that it helps us to help you. And so sometimes I talk with folks who tell me that they heard exactly what they needed to hear at a meeting. They listened to someone that they related to and identified with, and it made some things connect for them. It made them more aware. And there's great value in telling our stories. There's also great value in expressing pain. And I think a lot of us find it unnerving just to listen to someone who's crying, who really is in touch with past pain. It's a continuation. It starts out with crying, it moves to sobbing, and it culminates in wailing. And those are sounds that no human being should have to make, and yet they are an outward expression of something that we have been carrying for far too long. I know that my higher power does not want me to carry past pain. I also know that it can only be released a little bit at a time. So once we get past the initial shock, what we call the denial of loss, then we move through anger. A lot of us are angry at God or angry at our higher power because this could have been prevented, this could have been different. We're angry at the systems that failed our loved ones, whether that's in healthcare or in my line of work. We want someone to blame. We want somebody to be angry at. And quite often we feel ashamed of the fact that we're angry. So I say that anger is just another healthy human emotion. It needs to be expressed and it needs to be released. Bargaining is, of course, all the kinds of deals that we try to make with God, or the kind of miracles that we hope for, that something would just be undone or not be true. And it's hard to be patient with yourself through those things. It's hard for us, I think, to be patient with anything that we believe to be irrational. That's okay if it's irrational. That just means it's emotional in nature. Depression is often a stage of grief, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It took me a long time as a therapist to notice that everybody's depressed, but nobody's sad. To genuinely express what we're feeling with vulnerability is incredibly healthy, but it's also incredibly uncomfortable, and it's hard to do. We are people who associate vulnerability with being hurt, not with getting better. So gradually, what we're working towards, of course, is the fifth stage of grief, which is acceptance. And acceptance is always hard for us. Acceptance is an emotional process. It's not an intellectual process. It's not something that I can think my way into. It's coming to terms with what is. And when something's painful, we typically avoid it. Acceptance is always optional. You don't ever have to accept something. But the cost of not getting right with how things have changed is a price that I'm not willing to pay anymore. I've learned that life is a series of ongoing adjustments. I've learned that it's a series of tragedies and wonderful, incredible moments. And most days are just something in between that too often we take for granted. If you really want to be of service to someone who is in pain, I think the best thing we can do is simply offer to be present. Don't try to fix anything. Just be with them. There's such incredible power in just holding space for somebody and just expressing care and concern for them. If you're anything like me, you'll be quick to reassure folks that you're doing just fine, even when your ass is falling off. I've learned that because the people in my life are like me, they're intuitive, they're instinctual, they have survival skills. The truth is I can't really hide from them how I feel or how I'm doing, and so I don't even try. I just express it. Here's where I'm at, and here's what I need. Here's what's going on for me, and sometimes you just really need somebody to let you vent or express how much this hurts or how much it sucks, how unfair it is. Holding space for each other and just showing up is enormous. It's incredibly valuable. I'm going to pause just for a moment. I'd really welcome your questions and comments. I really appreciate you, Katie and Rochelle, for your messages. Appreciate those. I'm going to tell a story real quick about someone that we lost in local recovery a lot of years ago, actually. Her name was Penny, and she was a pretty extraordinary lady. One of the greatest blessings in my life is that I've known some people who, they're rare, but their very presence helps you to feel better, helps you to feel more peace. And I would say, yeah, I've been blessed to know a few angels in my life. Penny was one of those people. She was about 4'0" and about 800 years old. And the first time I met Penny, I was watching her with people that she very clearly thought of as her children. And these were grown men, most of them very big men who would have to stoop way down to give her a hug. And Penny would do this amazing thing. She would say to people, "I'm going to love you until you learn how to love yourself." And the first time I heard that, it just really shook me. And I thought about how many people benefited from having her as a chosen family member, as a mom. How many people were inspired to believe in themselves because of her honest belief in them. And when Penny died, everyone reached out to her husband and said, "What can we do?" And they all, I think that's one of the hardest things about death is We're action-oriented people. We want to be of service. We want to do for others. And her husband's response was so beautiful. He just would say to folks, be more like her. Not just today, not just in response to grief, but in all things. Keep making those investments. Don't be complacent. Don't be stagnant. Continue to grow. Continue to transform. Continue to be the person that your higher power most wants you to be. And for a lot of us, I think there's a plateau. Therapists always use this cheesy metaphor of mountain climbing in terms of healing, but it works. Like, you climb for a while, you get to a place you've never been, you get to a point where you have more stability or better health or longer term sobriety than you've ever had, and that's awesome. That's a huge accomplishment. And that deserves to be celebrated. And then very quickly we continue on. We go looking for what is the next thing that I need, what is the next piece for me to let go of, what is the next experience that I need to have. And again, very often that is addressing past trauma, that's addressing mental illness, that's addressing self-harm, and learning how to cope with all of those things without drugs and alcohol. This is no small order. It takes a lot of courage. It's hard. It hurts. It sucks. I don't lie to anybody about it or pull any punches about it. But I love the expression that I didn't get sober to be miserable. I didn't get sober to have a half-assed life. I love the promises of AA and the phrase, having a life second to none. And I have seen that occur for an awful lot of people. I've had the joy of watching folks freak out because their life got too good or it was too overwhelming, and that's an amazing thing about us. It doesn't have to be just a bad thing that makes us feel overwhelmed. Good stuff overwhelms us. Anything that takes us outside of our comfort zone overwhelms us. So I'm going to encourage you to take stock. I want you to think about the folks that you've loved and lost, and what would they say to you today if they could? What would they be encouraging you to do? My belief is that they're in a better place. My belief is certainly there is no further suffering for them. And so my hope is that if you find that you are suffering, that you make the choice to grieve. My hope is that you'll make further investments in yourself and in others. My hope is that you'll really challenge your ideas about what it is to be quote-unquote strong and what it is to be weak. I don't believe that crying is weakness. I don't believe that expressing how much something hurts is weakness. I think it's incredibly healthy, and I think it's an act of courage that opens up doors for others. So introspection, revisiting steps 4 and 5, looking at something that inspires you. I often recommend Mitch Albom's book, Tuesdays with Maury, talking and exploring themes about death, talking about how fleeting and temporary all of this is. It's something that we know and don't think about day by day. My experience is that as I get older, I do think about how much time I have left, but then I very quickly turn my attention to what it is that I'm going to do with that time and what kind of investments am I going to make, and who is it that my higher power wants me to become, not only in the grand scheme of things, but what is it that I'm meant to be doing today. So today, I get to have the honor of being connected to all of you and to a host of really good people, and my hope is that progressively we come together as communities to more fully recognize that substance use disorder is a community problem, that all of us are affected, but that we also consider that there are many forms of recovery and all of them deserve and need our time and attention. So I'm going to be signing off shortly, but I want to encourage you to connect with me as always. Particularly if you have questions or you're struggling to find your way in recovery, Jim@sobernow.com is the easiest way to connect with me. I would love to hear your questions. I would love to point you towards some resources. And I would love to hear from you topics that you'd like to see covered in future vlogs or in future live streams. Speaking of vlogs, take a minute, do me a favor, head over to YouTube and look up Sober Now's Facebook channel. Well over 100 videos there now on different aspects of recovery and mental health and related topics. Completely free, yours for the taking. And also want to encourage you to check out our website, of course, sobernow.com. We've moved to a monthly subscription service, so our program is more affordable than it's ever been. Under $15 a month, and that gives you access to both of the 28-day home study programs that I've created, one for recovery from substance use disorder and a second one for affected others, for those of us who have loved ones in active addiction. Completely confidential, complete anonymity, lots of exclusive content there, and a growing audience of folks who are working pretty hard to change their lives, and just another opportunity there. So please, in the midst of everything that you're going through, take excellent care of yourselves, reach out to others, and ask for what you need, because you really do them a service by allowing them to hold space for you or be present for you. Blessed be, and we'll talk again next week.